Welcome to And Ninthly,
an Inside Number 9 podcast.
With your host, me, David.
And me, John.
Hello, John.
Hello, David.
How are you today?
I'm alright, thank you very much. Bit tired. We've reversed roles. I had to hot-foot it back from the office today. I did not eat a pizza. I ate a quiche.
Mm-hmm.
Not a cauliflower quiche, though, I should add, whilst rewatching Inside Number 9. So I'm full of quiche and a bit tired. That's
full of
basically
quiche and raring to go.
That's all the news that's fit to print. How about you?
Yeah, fine, thanks. Yeah, as you suggest, I've been at home, working from home today, and it was a tiring day, and I am also... it's funny, on one level I don't like to date these podcasts, but also if you listen to this as it comes out in late May 2024, or if you listen to it months or years, this is from now, in the UK, yesterday a general election was announced for early July. The current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is holding a general election, which may spell the end of Tory government in our country after 14 years. So I'm feeling both cautiously optimistic and absolutely at the end of my rope, which is probably kind of what the average British mood at the moment, really, would you say?
Yeah. So long, bye, and thanks for all the varicose veins.
Yeah, I think we made probably even more thick of it references to each other yesterday than we normally do, which...
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute bonanza for me yesterday. It was, it's glorious. I mean, how could you not just... A snap election called that no one was expecting. How can you not just see Ollie Reader running down a corridor with a television in his hands? It's, yeah, fun times. I feel like one of the puns I haven't seen yet, so I immediately came up with a headline pun. Now, I think if you're a Tory voter, then it will be Mourn on the 4th of July.
Sure.
Thanks. One of the newspapers went with Gone on the 4th of July, and I see what they've done there, but I don't think that necessarily works as a pun.
No, it needs a bit more workshopping.
Yeah, I did like Drowning Street, though. I thought that was pretty good.
For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, Rishi Sunak announced the election in the pouring rain, which was not a great start.
Oh, it's just, it's absolutely glorious. If I do not necessarily believe in a deity, but it's very strong evidence for it. That any kind of deity went, okay, let's have some fun.
Yeah,
let's have some fun with this guy. He's gonna try and reclaim some, I don't know,
dignity.
Yeah,
a scrap of dignity.
He's gonna try and regain a scrap of dignity. But I've got other ideas. And
yeah.
The fact that he was wearing a suit that not only was he soaking wet, obviously, but also he was wearing a suit that didn't seem to be absorbing the water.
No, it
just seemed to be, sitting. The water was just sitting on the suit.
Yeah.
And that man's, 7 stone when soaking wet anyway. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very silly day in a lot of respects, wasn't it?
It was absolutely ludicrous day, absolutely absurd. But in a way, I feel like obviously when Cameron resigned, we didn't. It was directly after the Brexit vote, so obviously we didn't get the joy of Cameron finally resigning. When Johnson finally went again, there wasn't really any joy in that because it had just dragged on so long and become so utterly ludicrous. In a way, I feel technically Rishi Sunak hasn't resigned, although he might as well have. I kind of feel like this is a nice opportunity for me to actually revel in a Tory PM like going down, basically watching him go. Liz Truss didn't really count because she'd only been there for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
so it's quite nice. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it yesterday. It was a lovely thing.
I saw someone saying that the worst thing that could happen to him now, the sort of nightmare, or for people who use that sort of phrase, the banter timeline would be if he actually won. because he looks like someone who does not want to be Prime Minister much longer.
Oh yeah, no, he's called this election now. Well, the official reasons they're going to give are, look, we've had a tiny bit of good news that we can spin about inflation, and therefore that's the best we can do is to claim that that's because of us, and maybe that'll, we can ride that through. God knows what will happen between now and November. Things will probably, like, the economy will tank again potentially. Let's be honest, he just looks like a man who's like, you know what, I just want a summer holiday. I'd rather have a summer holiday, and maybe, let's get the kids into a school in America before term starts.
It does seem very timed so that he never has to do a party conference again, basically, doesn't it?
It's timed just so he can get the hell out as quickly as possible. I kind of find this fascinating. Slightly talking in context, I guess, of seeing someone speak on television, but kind of wondering what's going on inside, or trying to interpret what's going on inside. It's very difficult to figure out Rishi Sunak, because there's no way in the world you can't just think, you can't believe this. You can't believe what's coming out of your mouth. So, like, what is your inner life like? There's no way you can possibly say out loud to the cameras, I've made Britain safer, and we've stopped the boats, and our Rwanda policy is effective. How, like, at what stage? We're living in a world where words just have absolutely no meaning anymore.
Yeah, I like whatever they go. I don't know how well any of this is going to date. Obviously, terribly badly if they win the coming election. let's just claim we predict that, just in case that we can get all the internet points if that happens. But I think the fact that they seem to have called an election specifically said the Rwanda plan can't happen ever. Like, if it ever was going to.
Oh yeah, no. That's very valid as well. And it's it's a policy that he never supported in the beginning, and for some reason has decided to adopt and make his flagpole policy. It's bizarre. For the last, let's be honest, the last 14 years of Tory government have been absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, hasn't it been, like, it's been awful. Like, there's been kind of madness in it, but it's been infuriating.
Yeah. It's been bonkers like The Shining, not bonkers like, say, Chuckle Vision.
Do you know, I've never heard those two compared, but now I think about it. To me, Danny.
Which brings us to Inside Number 9. From one doorstep to another.
I can't for the life of me remember what the two brothers are called.
Paul and Barry.
Paul and Barry. Here's Barry.
There you go.
There it is. Okay.
That's the one. So,
thank you, and welcome to And Tenthly, a podcast about the goings-on outside the front door of number 10 Downing Street.
There's a bit of overlap there, isn't there? A little bit of overlap. So, this episode of And Tenthly, we're talking about Series 9, Episode 3 of... whatever the show is we talk about. Inside Number 9.
No. Yeah, this is where David's getting. We don't actually make Inside Number 9. You realise that, right? I know we'd love to. I know we dearly wish we were in their position, but we don't actually make Inside Number 9. We're the other thing.
We're the other one. Okay, it's a podcast about Inside Number 9, as you may have realised at this point, and we're here to talk about Mulberry Close, third episode of Series 9. I should say, if anyone's listened to the one we did a few weeks ago about Boo to a Goose, the first episode of this series, we mentioned then when we were talking to George Daniel Lee that me and John were lucky enough to go to a preview screening of this a few months ago, as we speak, which was held at the BFI in London, and they showed 2 episodes there. Risha Smith and Steve Pemberton were there, and they showed 2 episodes as a preview, and that was Boo to a Goose and this one, and Mulberry Close. So we actually have seen this episode before, and had seen it before this week, about 2 months ago. So it's another one. I mean, this is the last spoiler we have. Basically, they didn't show any more episodes, so the remaining 3 episodes of the series will be new to us completely. But this was a rewatch.
Yeah, and interestingly, they showed them the other way around. So this was the first one. Mulberry Close was the first one they screened, and then Boo to a Goose they screened directly after. Which is interesting that they chose to screen it that way at the event, and then the other way around in the running order.
Yeah, it's interesting that they.
Nothing else to say. It's just interesting.
Yeah. No, it is. I was actually thinking back to our first viewing quite a bit actually on the rewatch that I did today because. I really enjoyed the experience of watching this one in the crowd.
Yeah,
in a cinematic environment, which I think we'll touch on why that is because of the qualities of this episode and everything like that. But I actually found it a really conducive experience to enjoying it actually, and very different from watching it at home again today.
Agreed.
So I was wondering how to start this one as always, but I like this one. I think it's really good. It's really solid. I think it's funny. I think it's really tight, obviously, by the nature of what it is, and the choices that they made in making it and in zoning in on what they do with it. And I enjoyed it on rewatch again. I think it's a really solid Inside Number 9 episode with a maybe not startlingly original, but neat conceit that they execute well. And I think it's a good one. How about you?
Thanks for listening to Ninthly.
Yeah, it's a short one.
We'll be back next week. No, I completely agree, actually. I remember seeing the screening at the BFI, and I remember that opening shot of the doorbell cam, and my brain in the first 5 seconds just went, oh my God, they're going to do an entire episode with the doorbell cam, and I love that. Absolutely glorious. You can tell from the opening shot that it's lower quality or touched up video in the dark, and you can see a character coming into view, coming into the frame, and then going out and going back into the house. And at that moment, I kind of went, yes, I'm really here for this. I think this is a wonderful idea. And obviously, they've done CCTV before with Cold Comfort.
Yes, that's an obvious episode to compare this to. Yeah.
Cold Comfort's the Samaritans-esque call centre one. So it's not the first time they've played with the form visually in terms of other environments that you would find cameras in and how you could tell a story that way. But yeah, I love this. I'm a big fan of formal constraint leading to stylistic invention, and I think this does it absolutely beautifully. Barry Shippees again is the director. We should say right up top.
Al Campbell.
Sorry, who? It's interesting, isn't it? Because when the camera's that static and it doesn't move, you kind of wonder, oh well, like how much of that is directorial choices and how much of it is just as written, like with no ability to move the camera really. I wonder what choices are there, but actually I think there probably are quite a lot of choices, and we'll talk more about those, but I think they all work really, really well.
I think for an episode that is a bit more skewed in the comedy direction in some ways than the more sort of dark directions that they often go in and went in last week. It's also got a great horror framing, isn't it? Because it's got that fixed point, that observation sort of fixed camera thing is quite storied in horror now, particularly in the last sort of 20, 30 years. Like so, you've got things like Cachet and things like that came out in the noughties, and you've got the Paranormal Activity films, which it sort of called to mind, where you're sort of scanning the screen, and Skinamarink, more recently, a horror movie that I really loved about 2 years ago. And I think one thing I really enjoyed about watching Mulberry Close at the BFI particularly was that scanning of the screen. I remember having it up on the big screen and just being absolutely aware that I was actually, as much as I was listening to what was going on in the foreground, I was so often just looking at the background and the houses and the windows behind them. And because you're meant to do that, and there are times when they play on that, like when the lights go on over the road, and Pempton and Dorothy Atkinson are moving around up there, and it's played for a laugh. But I was watching the windows really obsessively, because obviously when you start watching this episode the first time, you don't know if it's going to be a full-blown Inside Number 9 horror one, if supernatural stuff's going to be happening. They play around with that a bit. And actually, the one, particularly on this rewatch, I think more the rewatch than the first viewing, actually, I was thinking Cold Comfort is the obvious one to compare it to, but I was actually thinking there's more of Deadline in this than there has been in a lot of other episodes. And I remember Pemberton and Shearsmith at the event, they were talking about how quite a lot of these scenes are extended, and particularly, the sort of farcical ladder scene. They said, I remember them saying that they basically had rehearsed that like a play, and got it like sort of note perfect and got all the timings right, and it's quite an extended scene that in one take, and that's a bit like almost like a diluted Deadline, isn't it? And I was thinking, when I was scanning the windows in the background today, I was thinking of the way Deadline uses the earlier Quiet Night In, doesn't it, where you're also seeing people, creeping up on a suburban house and things like that, and a Deadline uses that to subvert that footage that you're somewhat familiar with as a fan, and you're looking in the background and you see ghost children and stuff like that. It's so it almost feels like they've taken a few tricks and maybe a bit of a vibe from Deadline, and maybe just something they greatly enjoyed doing, as far as I understand it, and sort of put elements of that into this more recent episode as well.
Yeah, that's a good shout as well. Deadline, actually, that hadn't occurred to me. I guess in the feel of it, I guess more than anything else, really. So it's another one where we're undeniably in the real world again. It's we're 3 episodes in. Episode 1 is obviously not actually supernatural. We haven't had anything supernatural yet, which would suggest that we maybe have a big supernatural one coming.
Yeah, I suppose you could debate the duplicates, the clones in Boo to a Goose. We don't really know what they are.
Yeah,
exactly,
but I wouldn't call that supernatural. I'd call that dystopian or speculative, which I class as somewhat different. So that's interesting that we're still in the real world. Everything is to an extent naturalistic, certainly not as naturalistic as last week, but it is naturalistic, or even it reminded me of Alan Ayckbourn, if anything. And you're right about kind of the broadness of a lot of the comedy, and Adrian Scarborough being there. I'm sure he's done Ayckbourn. He screams Ayckbourn to me. But yes, so a lot of very broad kind of cul-de-sac comedy of manners, laughing at the foibles of it's curtain twitching neighbours, basically, isn't it? That's exactly the territory we're in, and throw in a bit of a let's call him a naive or a bit of a lower status, possibly not quite as bright as everyone else character, and away you go.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned Ayckbourn, because I was thinking of another Alan in Alan Bennett, and I was thinking, and actually I realised I was doing a little bit of cast. I normally leave this all to you, but I was doing a little bit of looking up the cast and what they've been in and everything, and I know Adrian Scarborough from a few things like Gavin and Stacey, and he's just one of those faces that crops up. But then I was looking at all his credits, and I was seeing that back in the 90s he was in the Madness of King George film, and indeed I think the play as well. But there's what I mean by that was, I think I've got on my notes that this is Alan Bennett or Talking Heads rather specifically, as a techno thriller, because in Talking Heads there's a lot of kind of horror of suburbia and horror of like middle class scorn and judgment and snobbery, and a lot of that's throughout Bennett's work really. But I think there's a Talking Heads particularly where I think it's the Patricia Routledge one from the first series of Talking Heads, which is all about a lady who just can't mind her own business essentially, and writes threatening letters to people, and is delusional about what they might be up to and things like that. And it's but then of course you've got other bits of Talking Heads where there really is dark stuff going on behind closed doors, and that sort of fear of suburban darkness is very justified. So it's got a lot of that, and I think it's just that it's funny because I grew up in a suburban house at a suburban street in Manchester, and actually John is next week as we record this. John's going to come and visit next week, so John's going to get to see specifically where I grew up. And I wouldn't say it's exactly the same sort of suburb, but everyone thinks their suburb is. Everyone who grows up in suburbia sort of makes excuses for their own suburb and kind of thinks, oh, mine's not like those ones. But they're particularly the more I live outside that kind of environment, and now when I go back and visit, I'm like, yeah, it's probably not for me as an adult, really. But there's a lot of elements that are quite painful if you know suburbia well watching this. But specifically, I was thinking, it's funny we were talking about the upcoming election, because I remember a couple of years back I was out canvassing for a political party in southeast London, and it was kind of much further out of London than we normally sort of live and work in, and it was in proper suburbia, where it's hard to not own a car and all that kind of neighbourhood, where you've got these things. And the thing I remember specifically from that sort of, political canvassing, going door to door, etc., was every single house had that identical doorbell camera. Every single house, and often an identical ring. It was like the most successful doorbell salesman had been there the week before. It was in all seriousness, every other house, if not more, had exactly the same model doorbell of this sort, that's filming you. And it's, especially when you're a political canvasser and with the best will in the world, you're basically bothering people, and hounding them at home. It was hard not to feel that gaze turn back at you. You were aware you were being filmed, however temporarily, each house you approached, and it really, really reminded me of that kind of environment. It's very oppressive, isn't it? Even if it's played for laughs,
Yeah. So firstly, I'm now imagining a sketch involving a doorbell salesman, because presumably his tactic would just be to stand at the door and wait until someone opened it, and then go, "I've been stood here for ages. You guys need a better doorbell." That would be route one, obviously. But then he goes door to door throughout the entire estate. The Alan Bennett thing is, I think that's a very good touchstone, actually. I think you're right, that kind of, behind closed doors of a quiet, scare quotes, normal kind of suburban existence. So, Adrian Scarborough, as well as being in the original Madness of King George, he's also in the History Boys. And I noticed as well that he's in The Habit of Art, which was an Alan Bennett play at the National, which is primarily about the friendship between Benjamin Britten and W.H. Auden. He was neither of those characters, and I did see that. We're going back, a good 10, if not more, years. I've seen him in a couple of other things at the National as well. I know I've mentioned to you before that he was the fool to Simon Russell Beale's King Lear at the National as well. Spoilers, by the way, for a 10-year-old production of King Lear, but they made quite a radical decision to have Lear actually beat his fool to death. So you see Adrian Scarborough getting kind of beaten to death in a bathtub. I don't know. Obviously there's nothing more here than coincidence, but obviously where this then ends up with Adrian Scarborough beating someone to death with a brick, just put me in mind of that.
Yeah, well, it's in Gavin and Stacey, which he's quite known for as well. He plays the hilariously named Peter Sutcliffe, or Pete Sutcliffe, whose role has the name of a serial killer, but is the comedy neighbour. Basically, that's what he is in this kind of.
Yes, the hilariously named. Did you just say?
Well, not innately, but I think it's one of the things.
Hilariously named, yes.
It was an odder show than it's often given credit for, Gavin and Stacey, amongst its more sort of milquetoast aspects. It's very popular, very mainstream, really, British sitcom about 10 years ago at its peak. But it had these like weird, dark touches like that, and like the fact that one of the biggest running jokes in it basically hinted at like incest, and they just seemed to get away with that at like primetime BBC One audiences and stuff. It was a very odd. But yeah, I
mean we're skirting dangerously close to the Matthew Horn conversation, aren't we? Again, because obviously Matthew Horn has appeared in Inside Number 9, in the. I can't remember what the episodes are called, but the Lonely Hearts Killer.
Love is a Stranger, yeah.
Love is a Stranger. Thank you very much. But let's all just. I mean, we're nearly home free. Actually, we've nearly got to the point where James Corden has not made an appearance, and I do think we're going to get away with it, and hopefully
it seems unlikely at this stage. But
it seems unlikely at this stage, doesn't it? Who of course is a History Boys link.
You're right.
James Corden starting in the History Boys. Interesting.
Can I? I've got a few nice. Well, I hope nice observations. Certainly observations about this episode and everything. I just wanted to ask on the sort of not critical, but just sort of slightly confused angle. What voice is Reece Shearsmith doing in this? What is that? He's doing a different voice.
Based on what you were just saying about growing up in suburban Manchester. Interestingly, again, my second watch I did with subtitles on. So the arguments that they're having indoors, which aren't particularly audible, so they have an argument over him having his music on too loud. And he says something like, "Oh, you've never liked my musical taste," and she basically shoots back at him, "Yeah, well, you're not in the hacienda now." So we've got a reference to a very famous nightclub. I think he's basically doing a kind of northwest, possibly sort of Mancunian, but he's just he's kind of dropped it down a bit to make it. Obviously, there's a lot of misdirection here, and it's like they've made the character particularly surly and sullen. In order to lead you down the path of whether he is or isn't guilty of killing his wife.
Yes, because it's rare that Risha Smith plays a character where he's like not creepy but intimidating, isn't it? Just straightforwardly intimidating, and this is that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if intimidating is the right word. The bit I really enjoyed on the rewatch was when he confronts the neighbours and he kind of goes absolutely nuts at them because the police have come to his place of work, and there's this lovely moment where he's arguing with them and he just kind of stops mid-flow and pauses and then just sticks both fingers up and goes "fuck off," which I think is weirdly brought me a great deal of joy, because there's really sometimes there's nothing better than just stopping and screaming "fuck off." So I think I found we were led to find him not necessarily intimidating, I don't think, but certainly to be suspicious of his demeanour and his character, and I suspect the character choices came out of that a little bit.
Yeah, he seems like another character, who kind of like maybe Tom and Jerry, and maybe the Diddle Dumpling character, who's one of those Reese Smith suburban portraits of someone who's a bit on the edge, who's like not having the best year of his life, possibly. It's just a bit kind of a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, I mean they make quite a lot of him being a bit of a drunk, and the argument all starts because he comes home and spills wine on a futon, which he then pushes down the stairs. And he turns up drunk on the doorstep, and this appears to be, the main sticking point in their relationship is that he drinks too much, and Val doesn't want him to, and this causes friction between them and arguments between them. So yeah, we are in the same sort of territory of an unhappy middle class suburban existence. See also Alan Ayckbourn, Alan Bennett, Alan Bates, Alan Partridge, Alan Parsons.
Yeah, all of them. I love the bit where I think it's only about like 8-9 minutes in, if that. But the bit where you get a nighttime shot and you get the skeleton figure turning up, and you kind of like, oh, this is are we actually going full supernatural? Or is there a serial killer in the neighborhood, or what are we doing here? And he walks right up to the front, and this properly is horror movie stuff. This is like the Purge kind of thing. Is this where we're going? And then he just takes his mask down, and it's just he's obviously just come over in the pub, and he's like paralytic, and it instantly becomes a sort of pathetic thing, and nice moment.
I think this is what I meant about the scope for the direction as well. There's again a really lovely shot when he appears in frame. He's stood slightly to the side with his head cocked ever so slightly, and he just appears and he just stands there still for a while, and it's really menacing. It's a really properly menacing visual image, and then they play with kind of him walking up to the doorbell and then the security light coming on and that throwing the light onto his face. Now, that reminded me of Murder at the End of the World, I should say. And that's the Brit Marling show that she did to follow up. Oh God, what's the one before that? That's kind of the mental kids with a octopus and I'll come back to that. But anyway, there's a very, very similar shot in Murder at the End of the World. Spoilers, very mild spoilers for Murder at the End of the World, if anyone is currently watching or thinking of watching that. There is a shot. They're all trapped in a big rich person's mansion, basically, but are being hunted down, and they've all got doorbell cameras. So when someone rings the doorbell, they see the image on the screen inside, so they see who's there, and they do a very similar thing with, someone turning up and the light suddenly being shone on their face, and it being this kind of quite terrifying mask. And it then alludes to the idea of how a lot of protesters have started wearing these kind of face obscuring masks because there's so much facial recognition software out there. And I'm not suggesting that's their intention here, that they're making any comment about that, but it was visually very, very similar, like even a similar kind of skeletal face.
Something else that gives it a Deadline echo, of course. I hadn't really thought consciously that it's just approaching Halloween, isn't it? It's that kind of story. They make a point of one of the things the couple is doing, what they called, is it Damon and Val are doing.
Damon and Val, yeah.
Irk the neighbours over the road is putting up gaudy Halloween decorations.
Yeah, which is interesting, and I did kind of feel like that was possibly a little bit of an in-joke, which is nice because we know they love Halloween. We know they love doing Halloween stuff. We know they love the League of Gentlemen team loved pranking each other with fake deaths, etc. So actually to have it not be part of the plot, to have it just kind of thrown in there and then kind of going, oh, we love Halloween. It's, because they don't seem particularly joyful in any other way, do they? They actually don't seem the type. It seems quite out of character for them to, kind of go this far with all the decorations. So in a way, I feel like it's not really right. It doesn't really belong in there. And I kind of feel like maybe that is a little bit of a wink to the audience.
It's a nice way of having the theatrical skeleton up, the sort of cheap looking, but nevertheless quite creepy when the Nightfall's prop, and then having the actual skeleton figure appear as well, isn't it? It's a nice little kind of echo. I also like when he's telling the cheesy joke about the skeleton, he's like, yeah, he's got nobody to go with, and she just goes, Dorothy Atkinson just says, I see. It's great. Those characters, Pemberton and Atkinson as the couple over the road, it reminds me, because it's not exactly a suburb, but the nearest I've vibed, I guess, that I've lived like that in my adult life was the building I used to live at, kind of in the late 2010s, and they, it's that kind of classic shared building with a WhatsApp group where people get together to complain about things, and there's like a sort of cake sale once a year and things like that, and it's very oppressive and kind of claustrophobic to live in, and I like that Val and Damon are kind of these characters who are almost like fed up with it instantly, they know exactly what characters the neighbours are, and they know to avoid them,
Yeah, there was another WhatsApp group that was just complaining about you, right?
I'm very, very sure there was, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I definitely had some Damon aspects to me, I think, which could rankle, playing music too loud, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I should say as well, actually, still talking about the directorial decisions, I think one of the other shots I really liked, and it does come back as a plot point, is the shot of the spider, which is very early on, and there's a shot of the spider, and the camera focuses itself and refocuses itself on the spider. Now, obviously, they use this later to kind of as an excuse to say, oh, don't turn around, there's a big spider over your head, when in fact it's because Sheena is up in their bedroom. But it's a lovely little moment just quite early on, and also just a way of kind of making it's going to be one static shot, and there's not going to be much visually going on, so for them to add in that little flourish, I thought was very, very nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. I also remember even watching that at the BFI, I remember that came up, and I actually thought, we talk about trigger warnings a lot on this, and whether episodes should have trigger warnings and when they do and stuff, and I have a mate who's pretty arachnophobic, to the point of if he saw that shot he would jump out of his seat, and I was like, well, that's I don't feel like, I don't really like spiders, but I don't feel that strongly about it, but I was just like, that kind of necessitates a trigger warning for some people, doesn't it? It's just the way it comes into focus quite suddenly, like, oh, that's what that is, and it's really close up as well.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. The warning does say, contains some disturbing scenes.
There you go.
But also, like dog death. That's going to be a pretty big one for a lot of people. I think it was. I think lots of people have said this, but I particularly remember Michael Moore saying this. I think it's Roger and Me, and he's like, you can show human beings in basically any state whatsoever, and obviously that film is about Detroit, Michigan, and the heart of the place being ripped out of it and people being absolutely screwed over. And then I think there's one shot where someone kills a rabbit or something like that.
Someone kills and skins a rabbit to eat it, I think.
Yeah. And he said that was what everyone complained about. That caused the most outrage. You can do anything you like, but don't dare show the death of an animal.
Yeah, well, the fact that because it's the mixture between the death of an animal being played for laughs in this, isn't it? But also being a inciting incident for a pretty chilling murder. I mean, like the actual scene, spoilers as always, where towards the end of the episode, not quite at the very end, but where Val is off screen killed, but you hear her being killed with the brick, which is also set up very nicely. It's pretty horrible again, isn't it? It's not them shying away from really mundane, horrible, brutal murders. There's been a lot of that in Inside Number 9, obviously, but it's very dark.
Yeah, it is. It is dark. So that I guess this leads me on to. If we are not just going to gush about it, just one or two things that I would say didn't sit quite right for me, and one of them is the act itself of Sheila killing Popcorn. Let's name him, David. His name is Popcorn.
His name was Popcorn.
His name was Popcorn. I'm going full Meatloaf in Fight Club now.
Yeah. No, I got that.
His name was Robert Paulson. His name was Robert Popcorn. His name was Robert Popcorn.
I should know at this stage, because I was talking about the cinematic enjoyment of it, that obviously he's named after a cinematic snack as well. Something that you eat while studying the screen.
Or a Ben Elton novel.
It could be both, yeah.
It could very possibly be both. Anyway, my point was, so it cuts. So what you see in the narrative is that you see her open the door and she's looking across the road, and then it cuts. Now we then find out what's happened when the police turn up and they say, "Oh, has anyone checked the door cam footage?" And then they scroll through everything we've already seen, and then they stop and they show us that scene that we didn't see at the time. And I guess they could do whatever they want. Obviously, there's editing in it anyway. This is not Aristotle's unities of time and place. This is not all taking place in half an hour. That would be ludicrous. But it does seem like a bit of a cheat to be able to just leave that bit of footage out and save it for the end. It just didn't. It didn't quite seem consistent. But again, how else do you tell that story and kind of wrong for everyone and use the misdirection?
Well, you sort of don't need the twist, though, do you? Because it's not really. You don't know what happened to Popcorn, and just because he concludes that she poisoned it, it's not. You don't think he's right necessarily in that moment. She seems like such a nice lady, for example. And it's like, I don't know. I suppose in a way that bit is an unnecessary twist, isn't it? It's sort of okay. They set up her bad driving and everything like that, but it's not really materially needed,
Yeah, I'm not sure it is materially needed. I think you're right. I think that it serves to get the dog in the bin, to get Popcorn in the bin is the function of that scene, and obviously they cut the scene where that actually happens. I guess because then again, you're going back and you're seeing the scenes with Sheila as they're all stood around talking to the police, and I guess it's quite nice to have an air there of like her not knowing that she's done for as well.
Yes, that is satisfying. Yeah,
that she's she isn't accepting any culpability for this, and is going full. Or we thought he was a wrong and right from day one, and we saw him take her out in suitcases, although admittedly that was 2 weeks before she was murdered, kind of thing.
Which some sort of rehearsal.
Yeah. It falls into absurdity, I would say at this point, and Adrian Scarborough, Larry being there as well, and kind of lingering in the background, and that's quite a dark scene, I would say. Actually, that's quite a dark moment, because the one thing we do know is that Larry has battered someone's head in with a brick, but he's still just stood there going, oh, we knew they were wrong, we thought they were wrong. Like, that's dark. It's like, what kind of a man is this?
Yeah.
And by the same token, when Damon is dragged out of the house in handcuffs, when obviously he is the prime suspect before the reveal of the footage, like, he's just screaming, got what you wanted now, didn't you? He doesn't appear to be.
You're not getting your Tupperware back now.
Yeah. It's like, you've just found your wife brutally bludgeoned to death, and you're the one person who knows it's not you. So your reaction just seems a little strange. Yeah.
But he's not necessarily a very nice man. That's the other thing. Is
sure,
he's not the best person. But it is shocking and funny and dark. And I mean, it's odd actually, isn't it? An episode with all of that that we've just talked about. It's probably, I'm trying to think of a rival. It's probably got the silliest actual ending of Inside Number 9, hasn't it? In a really weird way that they've not really done before.
Oh yeah. Oh, I loved the ending. I thought that was absolutely. Do you know what? I'd actually forgotten the ending from when we watched it the first time, and I'd completely forgotten the Michael Ball voiceover.
It got such a big laugh at the cinema that I think I didn't even hear the line "I'm Michael Ball." I got the kind of I didn't particularly recognise his voice either, so I just got the kind of thing they were doing. But but obviously on the rewatch today, I heard it. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Also, I mean, if ever you wanted to, write a PhD thesis on Chekhov's gun and its influence in modern pop culture, I mean, I actually wrote down the time, which is 3 minutes and 50 seconds. And obviously, because I had already seen it and knew it, but within 3 minutes and 50 seconds, they'd talked about Sheila's driving lessons and how she's a really bad driver. Obviously, we'd met everyone, including Popcorn. Larry had given the advice about the brick. Mm-hmm. So, everything was there. Absolutely everything was already there. Again, it's a bit like the opening of Rear Window, and obviously there's other similarities.
I can't believe that's the first time either of us has mentioned Rear Window, by the way.
Well, we're going to mention it a number of times now. So obviously the main bit that reminded me of Rear Window stylistically is when the light goes on, and you can see that Sheila and Kenny are kind of spying from their window, and that's very Rear Window, obviously. But also just the Rear Window has that famous, wonderful establishing shot of Jimmy Stewart's apartment, where the camera kind of glides across all of these photos, and before anyone's even spoken a word of dialogue, you know who he is, you know what he does as a job, you know what his current situation is, you know where he lives, you know who the main people in his life are. Like, it's all there. It's just done in one shot during the opening credits. And I actually think in this as well, that's kind of everything is like, there's so many Chekhov's guns here. It's like, why would she be taking driving lessons unless that's pertinent? Why would such a big deal be made of the brick unless that's going to come into play? And likewise, bringing me back to the original point, why would they mention Michael Ball 2 or 3 times before you get to the end? And that's because the gag is going to be that they have Michael Ball, who's actually going to say, I'm Michael Ball.
And you're watching the Mulberry Close murders, yeah. It's it's nice as well with everything being in the frame, in the Rear Window frame. It just strikes me as you were talking about that maybe the starting conversation for this was, what if we do Rear Window, but from the point of view of, what's it like, Raymond Burr? Like, what does it look like from the other side of the street, basically? Because that's kind of where you're looking out from the house of the guy who might have killed his partner.
That hadn't even occurred to me. That's very good. I like that a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that a lot. We're from Raymond Burr's perspective.
Yeah, it's
Although
nice.
spoilers for Rear Window, no, let's not spoil it for anyone. He does actually kill his wife though.
That's how spoilers work. If you just whisper them,
Yeah. Then
people won't be spoiled.
no one hears them. I'm still just getting over the fact that I grew up knowing him as Perry Mason, and then suddenly I
And yet he
realised,
killed someone.
and yeah,
Him, a law-abiding man. That's interesting. I also just liked more on this rewatch than when I first watched it. But I was like, oh, it's nice to have an Inside Number 9 where you are. It's again kind of a cheat, isn't it? But you're looking out from a number 9. That's the whole conceit of the thing. But then, kind of a punchline, a visual punchline, I suppose, or conceptual punchline at the end is that the number 9 is the bin. It's what's inside number 9 in that sense that is pertinent.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's what's inside bin number 9, but also it's 9 Mulberry Close, and for the first time we're inside looking out. We are inside viewing everything outside of it,
but also wondering what happened inside number 9. And in a sense of we can't turn around and look into the house. And,
it's very layered, isn't it? It's very very layered.
It's pretty good.
I'll say as well, I did also quite like the invention of them then switching to the police dash cam and the body cam. I think that was very clever, because obviously you could have just played it all from the doorbell cam at that point. You could have carried on. You could have had the police having the conversation in front of the doorbell cam and someone going up to it and saying, "Has anyone checked this footage?" But I like the invention of that, of making it dash cam and body cam. It's interesting here that we've got, that they showed them together, although that may have just been for, as they said, what was ready to be shown, basically, at that point. But we're in CCTV surveillance state territory again, aren't we? It's where this entire story is played out either through a private yet accessible recording device, and then when the police turn up, equally everything is recorded on dashboard cams and body cams. You can actually see a woman in the background as well filming on her phone, which obviously we know that everyone's constantly being filmed by people with their phones, etc. But it does seem to be making, I don't know if it's making a point, it's certainly making a feature of surveillance footage and how that affects the world that we live in, and how that affects the consequences of our day-to-day lives. And now we've had 2 episodes now that have been very strongly, I would argue, very strongly critical of no, I don't know that it is critical. I might revise that statement. It's certainly very interested in the surveillance state and what that means, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. You should sort of correct yourself or backpedal there on the criticality of it, because it's weird, isn't it? Because it is if you want to see the murderer, well, both the murderer and the dog killer, I guess, get their comeuppance, so to speak, it's the surveillance state or surveillance society that saves the day, isn't it? The doorbell has the information, and that's actually, we were talking before about Boo to a Goose maybe being a sort of in conversation with Black Mirror inside number 9. You have a bit of that. You also have the fact, I remember there's a Black Mirror, I can't remember the name of the episode, but there's a Black Mirror which involves what people can record through their eyes and people being witnesses to crimes.
The Memory of You.
Is that the one with Andrea Riseborough in it, or am I getting that? It might be.
It's the one. It's not the one. It's the one with Doctor Who in it. It's the one with Jodie Whittaker in it.
There is, there's that one, and it's kind of set in the same universe, I guess, but where people can record things through their eyes, but it's to do with who witnesses what crimes and things like that. But I know the one you mean as well, which I think might be written by Jesse Armstrong, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But I actually was thinking in the last series of Black Mirror that was on, I think they had that episode that was sort of talking about Netflix, the morality of Netflix murder shows, basically, and about true crime and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very, very interesting as well. Yeah, and there's a whole slew of them, and it's not just Netflix. Although Netflix seems to be making it's a bit of a USP, but Channel 4's running a close second. That is interesting that she feels that this is an opportunity for, will there be a Netflix show out of it, and her saying that's why she's taking notes, because she'll have to hand them over. What to the police? No, to Netflix. Boom. I mean, it's a punchline. It's a good gag. But we don't have time to go into the cultural, intellectual, and ethical ins and outs of true crime murder stuff, I guess.
And nor did they. I mean, it's more of a joke in this one than that aspect of it. At least is more of a throwaway gag, really. But,
it's definitely a throwaway gag, and I think they're kind of poking fun at it as well by having the Michael Ball thing. I'd be curious to know, actually. I'd be curious, were we to meet them, I'd be curious to know what their viewing habits are like, and given that they tend towards the dark and the grisly, do they like true crime stuff? Do they like true crime podcasts and TV shows, or is that something they don't enjoy because they're creatives and they prefer storytelling, crafted storytelling, rather than cheap talking heads interviews cutting together some footage with some foreboding music?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it?
I think TV music composers are the real winners out of true crime, aren't they? That's
they are, and of course this is an episode without a score until I think you get a little bit over the Netflix show at the very end there. But this is
you get a little bit, and Christian Henson is still credited as the composer of the incidental. Well, there's no incidental music, is there? That's an interesting one. Has that happened before? Probably in Cold Comfort, I imagine. It would stylistically, it would have to be in keeping with the trick there.
I'd have to rewatch that. I vaguely remember maybe when it's getting a bit more tense, there might actually be some music over that, which is an odd given the conceit of it. But I'll have to revisit that. Cheekily, I'm going to steal a march on you slightly, because I know you usually like to flummox me with trivia about the acting.
I mean, if you're going where I suspect you're going, like, fill your boots, man. Because when I did my research on them, and obviously I really only do it for one reason, this is a bonanza.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, I didn't look up everything, but there were a couple of actors in this that I recognised to various degrees. I was talking about Adrian Scarborough before, and I think I did mostly recognise him through Gavin Stacey and The Madness of King George and a couple of other things. But it was Vanette Robinson who plays Val, I was like, I definitely know her for something. And I think the thing I actually know her from is Sherlock. Thinking back to it, I was like, she's in Sherlock, and I sort of remembered her as that kind of quite minor character, really, but sort of sassy detective who doesn't like Sherlock, essentially. In that,
she's kind of Inspector Lestrade's I don't know, chief officer or whatever,
deputy or something. Something like that. But I remembered her from that, but I also then I looked her up and I less remember her from this, but obviously know she did it. It's funny you should mention Whittaker before, because she plays Rosa Parks in the Whittaker era Doctor Who episode.
She does.
Which is quite a major thing for certain Who fans. Not an episode I was particularly in love with, but you could say that about a lot of that era. That was the big thing. I was like, I definitely know her, and mostly from Sherlock. But do impress me with some other things.
Well, it's a bonus, because we have an actor who has been in Doctor Who twice as different characters, because she is also Abby Lerner in 42. Which is a Tennant era. Wow. Oh, no, hang on. Is it Tennant? No, I think it is Tennant. 42 is Tennant, isn't it? So she plays Abby Lerner in 42, and then she comes back and she plays Rosa Parks in Rosa. So we have... And that's kind of... you'll speak to this more, I'm sure. That's fairly rare that actors are recast as separate characters. I mean, obviously we remember the kind of logistical acrobatics that they did when they cast Peter Capaldi, and I was like, but he's been like a Roman,
a fairly major character.
He's been a fairly major character. How can he be done
twice?
Oh, well, yes, because it's not his real face, and his face always changes. And maybe he chose a face from one of his adventures. It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I never found that very convincing. Really,
because
it was also a bit half-hearted.
It's the most retrofitted argument ever, but sure, why not? But this is just pure and simple. We like this actress. We're going to cast her as two separate characters. She's also in episode 9 of Star Wars. She's in The Rise of Skywalker, fairly minor part, but she's one of the pilots in that phenomenal Rise of Skywalker film.
That was one of the most sidebar. That was one of the most dispiriting experiences I've ever had at the cinema. I got out of that feeling genuinely depressed.
Well, this is the thing. It's what is it? Is it the 20th anniversary of The Phantom Menace?
Yeah. Well, no. Would it be 25th?
Is it more than? Because
it came out in 99.
Oh, there we go. 25 then. And yeah, and my I don't know, my TV guide popped up the other day to kind of go, oh, experience all over again, 25 years. It's like, oh man, that was the most dispiriting experience, and I have no wish to relive it. And
cut to Simon Pegg burning all his merchandise.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I was very much Simon Pegg when The Phantom Menace came out. Burning all of those things. Anyway, how do we get onto that? Vinette Robinson. Yes, so Sherlock, Star Wars, 2 episodes of Doctor Who. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned that Adrian Scarborough is also Carla Jex in A Town Called Mercy. So we cover 3 doctors in this episode. That's what I was excited about. It's a proper bonanza.
Very nice. Yeah, that really is. Yeah. Well, I suppose I'll just turn over to you for some final thoughts, John. I think I pretty much said it all, but I like this one. I think it's solid. I think it's good. I enjoyed seeing it at the screening we went to. I enjoyed rewatching it again, and it's another good one.
It is another good one. The other thing I've got written down just to mention is whether it's an intentional nod or not. Who knows? Some of the building stuff with the lights coming on reminded me of Jacques Tati, and kind of Playtime and Mon Oncle, where he does a lot of kind of sight gags of things that are going on in houses in the background and lights coming on and off. So it sort of reminded me of that. And obviously when Damon has got his hose out and is cleaning the boot of his car, I mean that's pure Henry Hill. I hit a skunk, Karen. I hit a skunk. So nice little intentional, not Goodfellas nod. I felt. Really enjoyed it. Just really enjoyed it. Definitely enjoyed it at the time. And like you say, I'm really glad I've had that experience of watching it in a cinema with a big audience, because it completely changes it. We know this about culture, about film and TV. You respond very, very differently. But it was a real joy, and there were proper laughs and gasps and everything. I don't remember that it being particularly that as vocal with Boo to a Goose, and I think that speaks to the difference in the nature of the 2 episodes.
I think it's partly the lack of score as well, so you can hear all the laughter a lot more, and it's kind of punctuated in a way that score would,
Yeah, quite possibly. Also, I was obviously we were in a good mood because we were at the BFI watching brand new Inside Number 9 with Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton and Adam Tandy and Jim Howick, all being there. But also, we obviously started in a good mood because I'm sure, as you'll remember, just before the screening started, you turned to the two girls who were sat next to me and said, "Oh, have you come dressed as characters from The Harrowing?" And they took a beat and they looked at David and they went, "No, we're just goths." and I just put me in such a good mood. I think I was ready to enjoy myself. Funnily enough, because I was.
I just didn't believe them. I just straight up didn't believe them. I still don't believe them.
Funny enough,
exactly like the 2 girls from The Harrowing.
Because I was rewatching The Stakeout, As research for last week's episode, there's a line in the stakeout where they're talking about the vandalism in the cemetery, and one of the lines is, no, they're just goths come over from Leeds.
which these people were, apparently. Honestly, if you guys had been, if you, the audience, the listeners, had been there, you would have said the same thing as me, probably. I guess.
Listeners, I dispute that. Whether you'll hear this or not, listeners, is another matter entirely, because obviously I don't do the editing, as we know. So if this doesn't go in, David, then I'll have to repeat it for the next 3 weeks.
It'll eventually get in. I'll miss it one time.
Yeah,
or you can whisper it you do with spoilers.
I'll whisper it with the spoilers. Which is to say, 3 left.
3 left, and actually can't wait. Escape room themed one next week, I believe. I don't know anything about that, really.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sounds good. 3 left.
Excited for that.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Say goodbye, John.
Goodbye, John.
It's going to be a long next 3 episodes. Bye.
Jo, what we go me across the fence for common sense. I got a tomato plant will win a prize, won't that be nice? And by the way, how's your wife? Your holidays was spent in Spain. You went like rain, you'll go again. Of the brain pipe separates next door from me. My pink half of the drain pipe, oh mama, belongs to me.